Hi everyone. We are very lucky today. We are with Mr. Claude Durand. I'm sure most of you know who he is. He's head of the multilingualism unit at DG Interpretation at the European Commission. So first of all, we have to say good morning and thank you to him. Hi Claude.
Hello, Lourdes. Good morning.
I have some questions for you. So let's see how it goes. First question. When did you start working as an interpreter and why did you decide to become an interpreter?
Well, I graduated in 1974, so a long time ago, as you see, 40 years ago. And that was at SCIC, Sorbonne in Paris. And I decided to come to what was called the Common Market in Brussels, where the Commission, the European Commission, had its headquarters already. Why do I decided to become an interpreter? Well, probably because I was very interested in politics and in languages. In politics, because my father was very interested in politics. He was not involved directly in politics, but he used to comment on political events, current events in France and abroad, overseas, everywhere in the world. Every time we had, family lunch, especially on Sunday, there was a sort of political tribune with our father between my sister, my brothers, me, and our parents. And that political discussion, which was a sort of recurring event every week, was something which fascinated me. And that's why I wanted to study political science. And at the same time, I was very interested in languages. Not because we were speaking different languages in the family. We used to speak French, all of us. But my father came actually from very far away. He was born in New York. And that's why he had studied English very, very early in his life. And then he came to France and he married a French woman. But because of his background, because of his father's background, my grandfather was working for the diplomatic service of Haiti, because my grandfather came from Haiti. There was a sort of very open climate in our family. We were used to the fact that people were different and that it was interesting to discover how different they were and to discuss with people coming from all over the world. And that's why when I was a little boy, and I remember when we had some guests from America, and I heard them speaking English, I decided that when I would grow up, and go to the secondary school, because that was the time when we would start with studying foreign languages, I definitely would learn foreign languages, and I would, put all my energy into it because I wanted to understand what people were, exchanging with my parents. Mm-hmm. That's why.
And how were things at that time when you started techniques used or languages, your program? How was it at the beginning?
When I started my career as an interpreter at the European Commission in 1974, in November 1974 exactly, well, that was, I would say, a small family, the interpreting service. Although I thought it was already a big family with roughly 100 to 120 permanent staff interpreters and more freelance interpreters. But still, it was possible at that time to get to know nearly everybody in the service. And very often we used to work with the same persons and get to know them and became friends. At that time, well, we had a working program with a lot of meetings, different meetings. But at that time, we used to work as interpreters very often in the consecutive mode. Because in 1974, that was 1 year after the first enlargement of the European Community at the time. English had become a new language, a new official language. And, well, it's hard to imagine now, but it was very difficult to find interpreters who had a good grasp of English at the time. And so, since I studied in Paris with English and German and French, which is my A language, my language combination matched exactly the needs of the European Commission at the time, and that's why I was recruited first on a 6-month contract. So I used to do, of course, simultaneous interpretation, but a lot of consecutive interpretation as well, because there were many working groups within the Commission where discussions were conducted in 2 or 3 languages only. Well, very often French, English and German. And that was exactly my language combination. And I remember having worked regularly for a working group preparing the draft directive on additives, which is implemented now. And when you see the labels of foodstuff, for instance, well, the result is what you see on the label is the result of the discussions of that working group. Then the text was adopted by the Council of Ministers and so on. Well, we had in the room 10 people plus a few interpreters. 10 people because you had 9 delegations, 9 member states who were represented at the time, plus a representative from the Commission who was chairing the meeting. And in these circumstances, we as interpreters were very well integrated in these working groups. We belonged to the group because we were sitting, in the middle of the group, working from morning till evening, so long working hours, but fascinating work, because this was technical but very concrete and very rewarding indeed. Experts and the representative of the Commission, they became aware of the assistance that we were giving, rendering a really professional service and, helping the discussion to advance until the text was ready for the Council of Ministers to be adopted. Mm-hmm. So many assignments in consecutive mode, a lot of assignments, of course, already in the simultaneous mode, because when we were working, for instance, with the 6 official languages, of course, we had to sit in the booth, because with consecutive you can't work with too many languages. It would take too much time for the delegates. And at that time, there were not that many subjects which were discussed in our European meetings. In 1974, there were 2, 3 or 4 domains, if you like, which were belonging to the competences of the European Community. There was the Customs Union, there was the Common Agricultural Policy, so many meetings, of course, on agriculture. There was the competition policy within the common market, as we called it at that time. And there was a bit of economics, but not too much in comparison with what we know and we experience today. So few subjects, few people, few participants in meeting rooms, few interpreters, and few official languages, which means that we hardly ever use relay interpretation. So direct interpretation was the rule of the game. And sometimes if you didn't understand Dutch or Danish, which was also an exotic language at the time, well, of course, there was a limited number of interpreters who could work from these languages, and some of us had to do some relay from the pivot interpreters just to be sure that we could give a clear message working into French for me or into English, into German, and so on.
Mm-hmm. And then how have things changed? Because 74, 2014, I mean, it's a long time, so I suppose things are different.
Yes. So things have changed with time and quite a lot. So there were several enlargement waves, of course. 81, Greece; 86, Spain, Portugal. In 95, Sweden, Austria, and Finland. And of course, 2004, the Big Bang. 2007, Bulgaria, Romania, and in the end, Croatia, which joined the European Union in July 2013. So I started to work with only 6 official languages. Now interpreters work with up to 24 official languages, and that's, of course, a major change. It means that consecutive interpretation is an exception to the rule now. Consecutive interpreting is still used in bilateral meetings, so using 2 languages only, but at a very high level, very often, between commissioners and ministers, and in difficult negotiations. So that's why it's very important that our interpreters know how to master a really professional consecutive interpretation, but it's not a common practice anymore. So simultaneous interpretation, sitting in the booth, working, in a team, has become a daily routine for interpreters. And it means that team spirit is very important indeed, probably even more than it was when I started my career in the 70s. Because, interpretation can be a very useful service, but it has to be professional, it has to be of a very high quality if it serves its purpose. But in a wide language regime, the quality will depend, of course, on the weakest link of the chain. And that's why recruitment has to be so strict and so severe, so demanding, because we want to be sure that there won't be any weak link in the chain. And in this sort of circumstances, the quality of interpretation for our clients will depend on the whole group of interpreters assigned to a specific meeting. So that's why it's so important to understand that interpretation is a very individual performance, if you like, but in our setting, with such a wide language regime, when we work with up to 24 official languages, interpretation will be a professional service if the whole team is working together in a professional way. And that is the challenge, but that is also the rewarding dimension. But I can tell you that when you, for instance, work for the European Council, the highest level with the heads of state and government, when everything goes well for the whole day or the 2 days of the meeting, and at the end of the council session, the chairman thanks interpreters and expresses the gratitude of the whole group of high-level politicians. Well, it's a very nice feeling to understand that, well, you have done a good job, but not only you as an individual, but the whole group, the whole team of interpreters. And that's why I think team spirit is one of the highest and most characteristic features of the work of interpreters today within DG SCIC.
Good. And one very last question. Would you recommend interpretation studies today to a young student? And if so, why?
Well, I would recommend interpretation studies to students who have an interest and a talent for communication and for subjects which are discussed in conferences, especially here in the European setting, and to students who are curious enough to, to get informed, to inform themselves better and better about these subjects like politics, economics, international law, environment, well, anything which belongs to this modern world, modern technologies, of course, and everything which makes that life is worth is worth experiencing, you know, and who want to be in the move and to, but of course, to maintain this very human dimension of communication. And in this modern world, well, where modern technologies have, you know, taken such a huge place and space, we shouldn't forget that, of course, distance communication is becoming something which is very common, very sort of daily routine when we see how social networks have grown and probably match a need of the human being to communicate with people who are very far away from you, but whom you cherish, from your family, from friends or colleagues, or if you are a scientist, a researcher, it's wonderful to be here, sitting in Brussels in front of your computer, but discussing a common subject with another scientist on the other side of the world, maybe in Australia, in the States, or in Russia, in Asia, anywhere. That's really beautiful to be able to communicate and exchange ideas and feelings with people who are at a distance. But distance communication doesn't mean that you don't need direct communication, traditional communication, one-to-one communication. And that's why the message I would like to give to would-be interpreters or to students who are interested in our profession as interpreters would be to say, well, you must be prepared to be able to convey messages between people, between languages, between people who are, you know, at a distance, with distance communication technologies. Remote interpreting, video conferencing will certainly be expanding in the next few years and in the time to come. But people, not only politicians, but also experts, specialists, and anybody in the world, all human beings will still feel the need to communicate with each other directly, eye to eye. And in that case, in that situation, when the interpreter is sitting in the middle between, you know, two people who want to communicate but who don't share a common language, well, you should be able to render a professional service. And sometimes maybe direct communication is more stressful than distance communication. So in your training phase, if you like, you will learn skills and techniques which enable you to master the interpretation techniques in both situations, distance communication, but also direct communication. And maybe direct communication will be more rewarding than distance communication. But I think we have to live in a world where both modes of communication exist. Distance no longer exists, but it doesn't mean that we are near to each other. And I think it is this human dimension in communication which probably will continue to attract students, the young generation, to this wonderful profession, which is the interpreting profession.